Welcome everybody to the Scarlet and Great Empire, Scarlet and Great podcast, Ohio State football with Scarlet and Great on YouTube. Still looking for 1,000 subscriptions, guys. If we're not there already, because I got a couple more videos coming out before this one. So if we're not there yet, looking for 1,000 subscriptions. We're going to do a merch giveaway when we reach that number. So look forward to that. If you like what you see, click like on the video. It helps us all the time, helps the channel out. As always, trying to give you some really solid free Buckeye content. I am here with my good friend, the Boise Buckeye, the game time guru himself, Shane Larson. Shane, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Even better now that I'm talking with you, man, about some Buckeye football. It's going to be a fun one.
Absolutely. We got a new segment for you guys, okay? This is not about new information or camp updates or recruiting or whatever. This is a fun little game we're gonna play called Who Would You Rather? And this is basically, who would you rather have between two Buckeyes at a certain position from different eras? I think this is going to be fun because this is always like, these are the kind of conversations we have on the workforce, right? When we're in with our coworkers who are also Buckeye fans, and we just start debating about what player was better from which situation. And we're going to talk about a lot of different players throughout the summer for sure. But today we're going right to the top, Shane, going right to the top. We're talking Eddie George, Heisman winner, legendary Buckeye running back. One of the first people that you and I both got to watch as kids watching the Buckeyes versus recency bias and Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, tremendous career, also a legendary Buckeye. It's one of them has a Heisman, one of them has a national title ring. You debate which one you'd rather have. I think national title for a team win, obviously, but Heisman obviously is as prestigious as award as it gets. And right now they're both killing it, or they were. One had a great NFL career, and the other one's doing pretty well so far. Needs to pick it up a little bit, but still off to a pretty good start overall. Shane, tell us your experience, man. You said you grew up, and Eddie made you a Buckeye fan. So how did that come about?
Yeah, man. So funny story here, guys. I was 7 years old. Okay, so that shows you how old I was. At 1995, second grade at the time, and in Idaho, the Buckeyes were the only. So the football starts at 10 o'clock in the morning here. So in Idaho, turn on the TV in the mornings. I just loved watching football. I remember one morning just turning on the television. This guy was running the ball. They had done a close up. I think it was a replay at that point. They were doing a close up of him running the ball from the front side of him running towards the end zone. And I thought he looked cool in his helmet. I thought the helmets looked awesome. I thought the jerseys looked awesome. Didn't know who he was, but I kept watching the game. Turns out it was Eddie George. And the next Saturday, same team was on. It was Ohio State. They were playing that 10 o'clock slot for our time here. So I just kept watching him. And throughout the course of that season, I just became infatuated with Eddie George. He was my favorite player. And that turned into me becoming a Buckeyes fan because I was rooting for the team that he was on. But that happened to be his Heisman season. It was like he was tearing it up that year. So they were showing a lot of coverage of him on national TV. We got to see him here in Idaho. I became the Boise Buckeye when I was 7 years old. So I got a big spot in my heart for Eddie George, man.
I hear you, but I know you, Shane, and you are a sports fanatic, and you are unbiased, and you absolutely can put the bias aside to determine who you think could be the better running back. So I trust your opinion on this, man. And I know if you come down with Eddie George, it ain't going to be because he grew up with him. It's going to because you legitimately feel he is the better running back, and that's perfectly fine. There's a debate to be had. These things are fun. I got to be honest with you. Terry Glenn was the reason I became a Buckeye fan, but that was in the same exact era as Eddie George. Eddie George's big seasons being 94, 95 being the Heisman year. And the great thing about Eddie was it started off he really wasn't kind of a nobody at the first couple of years. He got a few carries here and there. He got a little bit of a fumbling problem early on, but then he exploded in his junior year for 1,400 yards. And then it's the senior year, it just got even better, 1,900 yards for the Heisman winning year. I had some Nebraska fans recently tell me that he stole it from Tommy Frazier. Eddie actually had more total yards than Tommy Frazier that year as a quarterback. Tommy as a quarterback. And I'm not great. I'm not saying Tommy wasn't a great player, but I'm like, Eddie did not steal that. Eddie earned it.
It's funny you say that though, because last year I went to the Ohio State Nebraska game, and I actually didn't know the history of that, but I was repping my Eddie George jersey that I got. And so I got to start hearing everybody popping off about that. So I did a little bit of a history lesson myself while I was out there. I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't know any of this. And then saw the tiff that everybody had back then because of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. look, I'm not. I don't want to take anything away from Tommy. Tommy was a fantastic player, and and Lawrence Phillips, for that matter, was also a fantastic player. But Eddie was just special that year, averaging 6 yards a carry, 1,927 yards, 24 rushing touchdowns. Also a good receiver, underrated receiver out of the backfield, with 47 catches, 417 yards, and a touchdown. Didn't get a lot of receiving touchdowns, but still, that's pretty solid for a running back who was 6'3", 220.
Exactly. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say is like I don't think people paid attention as much back then to that, can you catch the ball aspect of it.
Mhm.
That is such a you said it perfect, Corey, underrated aspect of the game. When I'm looking at a running back right now, I don't care if you can just run the ball. I want you to be able to catch the ball, right?
Of course,
And he was
especially in
ahead of
today's
his
game.
time with it. Yeah, but he was ahead of his time with that. He was
You're right.
he was dependable out of the backfield. That means you can put him in third downs if you need to, or you can swing him out there and spread it out if you need to, which puts the defense at a disadvantage. And people don't realize how important that is for a running back to be able to catch the ball. Eddie George was ahead of his time, super underrated aspect of his game because everybody just thinks of him as a power back, I formation behind a fullback type of thing, line him up in the backfield and go. But he also could catch the ball. So I give Eddie George a lot of credit because, yeah, he's a downhill runner. He does his thing, but he could catch the ball.
Yeah, and Eddie was actually deceptively fast.
Yes.
For his size. I remember so many runs where I couldn't believe that he would break. I mean, Illinois is a perfect example when he ran for 319 yards, I believe it was. And that to me was just mind boggling at the time. It still would be mind boggling today. It's not like it's a normal thing. But 319 yards on any Division I team is pretty incredible. I don't care if Illinois was down that year or not. Actually, the year before Illinois beat Ohio State, so they couldn't have been too bad of a program at the moment. But Eddie George's credit, I mean, like he would run people. We saw it against Notre Dame. The infamous image. I'll pop it up here on the screen. The infamous image of him running away from Notre Dame defenders. That guy was deceptively fast for so big, and it was honestly, and I say as a young. Now, granted, it wasn't the first time he'd ever seen it, but as a young football fan at the time, it was really the first time we had been introduced to a guy that flipping big that could run that fast. He wasn't necessarily the quickest guy in the world. I get all that. He didn't have the greatest wiggle with his hips and stuff like that, but he could sidestep you a little bit, and he could get away from you. He didn't just have to run through you. That's the stereotype and the stigma for these guys that are this big. They just plow through you. Not true with Eddie George. He didn't just have to do that.
Not at all. And there's a comparison out here people like to say, and we talked about it earlier before we started recording. Derrick Henry is kind of like the tall, straight up running back in today's game that's still getting the job done somehow. But see, Eddie George was different than Derrick Henry. Yeah, they have similar stature in a sense of like how tall they are and whatnot, but he was sneaky athletic. Like you just said, he was sneaky. If you guys go back and watch film of Eddie George, yeah, it's a weird game. It's a different type of game. But like in today's world, in today's game, it's spread out. The defenses are spread out. They're bringing in more DBs. Why? Because the game is spread out. You're bringing in more receiving threats. It's an air attack, which makes it easier. I hate to say it, but it makes it easier on the running backs to get through to the second level. You got smaller dudes out there. That's just the reality of it. Yeah. Back then, you'd stack the box. You had 7-8 guys in the box because you weren't spreading that out. And so you didn't like Eddie George was not only just a power back. He could do it. He could hit you and get going, but he was sneaky athletic. If you go back and watch it, it was kind of deceptively quick and shifty for how big he was. 6'3" for a running back when you're going against stacked defenses that are shrinking the field a little bit is very, very difficult. And he held his own, and he had a pretty solid pro career too. Going into the
10,000 yards.
Yeah, and I mean he got a lot of carry. I mean he was a work horse in the NFL. Okay, so I want to ask you this though. So in the collegiate game, I also look at Eddie George as a professional. Now, for those listening, please give me your insight too. Leave a comment in here and kind of talk about that too if you have anything to say on this. But I didn't know. I was young. I was really young. But when I look back at the stuff, the way he conducted himself was that of a professional, even though he was a college-age kid.
I agree.
That is a huge factor for me too, for what I would like in a program, what I would like in the next level at the professional organizations and stuff. I want someone who conducts himself as a professional, a mature young adult. I didn't see that as much with Ezekiel Elliott. I thought Ezekiel Elliott was an emotional guy. So if we were to switch base here, case in point, Michigan State playing them, had a really rough loss to them at home. I believe it was at home. Wasn't it at home?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, his last game.
Monsoon game. Yep.
Yeah, that terrible game. And the way he conducted himself in the press conference really rubbed me the wrong way. And it showed his immaturity. Not saying he's not an amazing athlete because I love Ezekiel Elliott as well. But
you're also a Cowboys fan, so
I am. Well, they both see Cowboys drive right here. See, they both played for the Cowboys because Eddie got a year in with Dallas.
That's true. His last season, I think, was with Dallas, wasn't it?
I had a poster with him on there. It was kind of cool, dude. And I believe Terry Glenn was with us.
He was.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of Drew Bledsoe was like Terry Glenn And that's when we had Bledsoe at the end of his career. It was a really big mistake because all he do is blindly throw to him. Anyways, beyond the point, but the whole aspect is like, how do they conduct themselves as professionals? I thought Eddie George has the maturity factor advantage on Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Eddie did seem more professional. Ezekiel was more of a party animal, and not that he's a bad guy. Obviously, he's just a kid. Obviously he's a big kid. But there's aspects about it, Ezekiel I did like. I saw photos of him, like a random child fan would come up and want to play with him, and Ezekiel would sit down and play with him and things like that. So he was like a big kid in my opinion. I do agree with what you're saying though. Is Eddie seemed like businessman, immediately.
Right.
I remember the Heisman ceremony. It's like Eddie just has a presence about him. As far as ability goes, I would actually give the edge and athletic ability to Ezekiel Elliott. Remember, he actually barely edged out Eddie George in career yards by about 200, but he never had the season Eddie had. He was about 100 yards less than a season than what Eddie was. I would say that, Ezekiel showed up more maybe in big games than Eddie did a little bit. But like you said, though, the offenses are different. There's a spread offense. But what's interesting that you're saying, Shane, about downhill runners? Really, when you think about it, Zeke's not too much different than Eddie. He wasn't a guy that was a Barry Sanders juke you out of your shoes guy. He would get north-south immediately. And once he's north-south, he's extremely hard to tackle. He's great at disrupting a tackler's angle when he's hitting those corners. He's really great out of the backfield as a receiver, great blocker. He had an all-around game. I don't know what Eddie was like as a blocker. I can't quite. I never paid attention to that when I was a kid. That to me wasn't what a running back's purpose was. But a running back obviously has to have an all-around game this way. And it's interesting because I personally go with Ezekiel because I think he was more of a big play threat, and I think he showed up more in big games. But again, I do give credibility to what you're saying as far as the game's just different. I mean, Ezekiel wasn't going against 245, 250-pound linebackers every play. And not to mention, I wonder if you could argue that maybe Zeke had more talent around him than what Eddie did. Not to say Eddie didn't have a monstrous amount of talent. I mean, Orlando Pace comes to mind,
Right.
Obviously the Terry Glenns of the world. Although I would take any of these current Ohio State quarterbacks in a modern era over Bobby Hoying, in my opinion.
Right.
But again, he had Ricky Dudley. He had talent around him for sure, and had solid offensive line. But I mean, the year we won the national title, that offensive line play was some of the best I'd ever seen at Ohio State. That was unbelievable. The next year, it was not as good. That's where I think Ezekiel really earned his money as a Buckeye legend. Is not the year where he went off at the end of the year and we won the national title. It's the year that we needed him more than anything to be great. Because our offensive passing game was stagnant. It was terrible.
Right.
It was horrible to watch. And yet, even like Indiana's the best example. Like, Zeke, go win the game for us. We got nothing. Cardio can't get it done right now. Our defense is kind of suspect at the moment. And how many 4th and 1s did he take to the house?
Yeah.
And Kevin Wilson, even Zach Smith even talked about Kevin Wilson when he came to Ohio State was mad. He says, I had that defended perfectly, and I just can't stop him,
Yeah. And it goes to your point. Big time players make big time plays in big time moments. And that was Ezekiel Elliott throughout his entire collegiate career. I mean, anytime you needed him, he showed up. And I give him massive credit for that. I loved his style, especially in college. I mean, he was dependable. He was the one thing you mentioned was a blocker. That directly translated to his game. As a Cowboys fan as well, I can tell you right now, yeah, there's flaws to his game sometimes. And we'll get to that in just a quick second. But he can block. He can block. So when guys are blitzing, especially for a quarterback like Dak, when he has to block for Dak Prescott, who, especially in his first couple seasons, he's not a good passer. He was not a good passer. He needed to develop. He needed time to throw the ball and go through his progressions. And Zeke was back there laying the wood on dudes blitzing through. And I thought that was amazing. That was directly translated over to it. That's an underrated part of his game as well. I love that you brought that up. But yeah, I just always thought that he made the right decisions. Like Zeke would take the ball. He's waiting for that opening. And as soon as it opened, he'd make that cut and then he was gone. I mean, it was just a one decision, boom, one cut and go. But he did it at the right times, right moments. And he always came to play, which is a huge factor all through football. You need to have those guys who are ready to play. Big time players make big time plays in big time moments. I think his overall athleticism, his overall game is better than Eddie's. Yeah. I think it's more suited. And I think, and if I'm doing this game here, how would they fit in each other's era? I think Eddie might struggle in today's game for some reason. I just think if I'm trying to put him into today's game, yeah, Derrick Henry's having success, but that's one. It's just the way that he runs would be a little bit different today. If I were to put Eddie into or sorry, if I would have put Zeke into Eddie's era of even the NFL, I think he'd be just fine because of his overall athleticism and his overall game. So I'm actually giving Zeke the edge here as well. But what about ball security, Corey? I want to talk about that before we wrap that up. That's one thing. We say they're dependable, but what about ball security?
I think they both fail miserably in ball security. I mean, it's like it cancels each other out because, like, well, one of them could fumble, yeah, the other one could too. I mean, I don't. I mean, you shocked me to give the statistic you said about Eddie for in his career because we know that Zeke recently has had some major fumbling problems. In fact, last year I do remember a game. I think he fumbled two or three times in that game, and I was just kind of like, "What is going on?" But you told me that you go ahead. I'll let you. You're the one who brought that up, so I'll let you. You go ahead with that one.
Yeah, for the record, as a Cowboys fan, super frustrating watching Zeke fumble the ball all the time.
I
He had 6
imagine.
fumbles last year. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott has had 21 fumbles in his short stint with the Cowboys, just an FYI. But Eddie George, this was a very interesting statistic. Like we said, in 9 total seasons, he had 37 fumbles.
Oh, jeez.
That's a lot. I mean, obviously you don't lose all those, but 37 fumbles, that's a big time problem. I mean, if you go down the stat line here, you know, he had a season with 7, he had 2 seasons with 5, he had a season with 8 fumbles. My gosh, dude.
These
like,
are two big dudes, man. It ain't like it should be easy to pop the ball out either.
I hold on to the ball, and I get it. Eddie was carrying the ball quite a bit. He was the workhorse, like we said, but man, that's number one. You know, you gotta secure the ball. 8 fumbles in a season. That's crazy to me. Again, and I know Ezekiel Elliott is kind of on that same trajectory for his career. I mean, he's 1, 2, 3.
Might be more.
What are we at? Yeah, five seasons in. So he is kind of on the trajectory to be more than that right now if he does not pick himself up and figure that out this next season, which I actually think he is. He's going to be all right. But
he's got to get. He got that money, and I mean, this is another thing you talk about the maturity level. He got that money, and it really hasn't been as good since then.
No, and to get that money, he went about it the wrong way, in my opinion. So it's kind of iffy. Maturity wise, give the edge to Eddie George. Skill set wise, I give it to Zeke. But as far as ball security, as far as ball security, I don't know. Who's the better leader? Who's a better leader, Corey?
You know what? Man, one won a national title, but he had the better coach. Urban Meyer's unequivocally the better coach than John Cooper. If I needed a guy to be a guide for my younger players, I'd go with Eddie George.
Yeah, Eddie almost won a Super Bowl. He lost by a yard.
That's true, by a yard. He lost by a yard. Yeah, that's true. I forget about that. And to Eddie's credit, he actually was a major cog in bringing them back in that Super Bowl. Look, I love Eddie. This is not a game where we play like I don't like this guy, I like this guy. We both love both guys. I think I'd love to hear what people say in the comments. Please leave a comment and what you think, because honestly, I don't know if there's a wrong answer here. It's just your preference. I agree with I give the edge to Zeke for one reason, and you brought it up. This is all, so it's your fault. I think Zeke would have been great in both there. He was great in one era. I think he'd have been fine in Eddie's era. And I think you're right. I think Eddie might have a bit of a problem in today's era of spread offenses. But honestly, who knows? Because Eddie was fast and he was quick enough. Is it possible? I don't know if Eddie could outrun in the bullet position safeties, those smaller linebackers or not. But is it possible you spread out the line enough and he's not getting pounded on quite like he used to?
See, that's the beauty of this game. That's why we want you guys who are listening. Would you rather? Who would you rather? Put it in the comments. Let us know what you guys think. I mean, it's a fun discussion. It's fun to think about. Obviously, we'll never know, but it is fun to think about because you got a lot of varying factors that play into it.
And congrats to Eddie to being a head coach, by the way. We wish you all the success in the world.
Yeah, let's get Eddie on the show too, man.
I'm gonna try.
If one of these days, let's get him on here as a guest.
We gotta try. I know if we ever book him, like all 3 of us are gonna want to be on.
100%. I'm jumping on.
Exactly. Wouldn't blame me at all. So anyway, guys, we appreciate it, guys. Leave us in the comment section. Who would you rather, Eddie George or Ezekiel Elliott? And give us your reasons, by the way. We want to hear all your reasons. We read all the comments, guys. Shane, I appreciate you, buddy. We appreciate all of you tuning in. This has been Scarlet N Great, Ohio State Football with Scarlet N Great on YouTube. And check out Shane's alternate podcast, Game Time Guru. Go check them out. He interviews people from all over the world in the sports world. Extremely fascinating stuff. And you can get a much bigger diversity of what's going on around the sports world with Shane Larson and the Game Time Guru. Guys, we appreciate you. As always, goodbye. God bless, and go Bucks.